Today's radio is a Philips model P4212. It's a mains valve radio and it's from 1964, and I picked this up from a charity shop, in fact, for the princely sum of €40, which I thought was a bargain. And it's in very good condition. It looks great. It's very clean on the outside. I'm not sure what it's like inside, but it is a radio from the very end of the valve stroke tube era, before transistorized radios came into fashion. And it has 4 wave bands on it: shortwave, long wave, medium wave and VHF, which is good because we have very few stations here in Ireland apart from the VHF channels. VHF is great, it's beautifully clear. However, medium wave, our reception comes from the UK and it's noisy at the best of times and crackling and not very reliable. So we're going to take a little bit of a closer look at this before I turn around the back to see what's going on inside. And as you can see, it looks really clean. I will clean it up, of course, to make it look even better. On the top we have an array of tone controls, I gather. Tone controls obviously relating to these symbols along here. And you can see the 4 wave bands here with the VHF on the end, which is going to be very useful. There is a magic eye on it. I wouldn't expect it to be working, however, because magic eyes typically fade away after a couple of years and they just don't last the length of time that this radio is. So this radio is 60 years old this year. Happy birthday! And you can see on the top, there's a few marks on the top of the cabinet, but it has this beautiful piano finish on it, a lacquer finish, which I should be able to clean up. The only problem here is this on the right hand side, where one of the loudspeakers has been poked at and there's a few holes in the cloth. I'll initially try and repair that, push it out from the inside perhaps, but failing that I may have to replace the whole fabric that runs across the front and around the other side. The other side's fine. So time to have a look around the back and see what lurks in there. And around the back I can see that this is an extremely clean chassis in it. Obviously, wherever this was, there were no smokers in the house, because it is as clean as a whistle, apart from a little bit of dust, which we don't mind. And it has 2 fairly nice loudspeakers, one facing out east and west out of the sides, a big hunky transformer, because this is an isolated chassis, which is good. And the usual lineup of valves: ECC 85, EABC 80, EF 89, EL 84, etc, etc. And here's the model number if we can see it. Yeah, PH4212 from here's the date on it, in fact, 12/13/64. So the only thing I can see, apart from the magic eye being faulty, is the dial drive actually is slack. When I tried to tune the VHF wave band, the needle just doesn't move. So I would say the tension on the dial cord has loosened, but that's easily fixable. Apart from that, the radio is actually working. So let's get it out of the chassis and have a closer look. With the chassis out on the bench here, I've paid attention to some of the things that needed to be done. In particular, these 2 capacitors here, which have been replaced. These are the old ones. These are paper capacitors, and they were about 60% higher than they should have been in terms of capacitance. So they've been replaced. Other than that, though, the rest of the capacitors are fine. These mustard capacitors seem to be very reliable, Philips capacitors, and I couldn't find anything else particularly wrong down here. But you can see how densely packed the components are. I often wonder how they manufacture these radios when they look so complex inside. Up on the front, I've cleaned up by quite an amount the front of the set. I've cleaned the back plate here, and I had to reinforce the top corners here because these were broken. So I've glued some new pieces of plastic on and tied it up with wire. Other than that, I've cleaned up the knobs. The knobs look really clean now. And other than that, you can see again how clean this chassis is. It's amazing for a 60-year-old radio to look so clean without doing very much apart from just remove the dust. Other than that, I've done the alignment on the set, which was pretty close anyway. It really didn't need very much done to it at all. The only thing in particular it needed was the balancing of the FM output stage here. These are the two diodes encased in the EABC80 valve, and they do need to be balanced, and you do that by this little separate circuit that they've mentioned here. Two resistors connected via a microammeter, and you balance the very last coil in the chain, this particular one here, until you get a 0 reading on the meter. So that's been done now, and it has certainly made a difference, and it really sounds good now. And I can show you how it sounds in that I have the radio connected up through the bench speaker here, which is hanging up on the wall, and let's hear what it sounds like.
Trust the professionals. C2's company.I.
Agus, GRC. Security, the fact that they're controlled.
Going up in the other direction.
To the 100th anniversary of Sean as an award, taking a step.
They're not in because they got knocked out in the playoffs, and does he think the Welsh people will be supporting him?
That's us, Paul, every Saturday.
So that's VHF. And medium wave, there's not very much on medium wave, but I am picking up Radio 5 from the UK, which is a bit of a miracle considering we're in a garage here. So this radio is really good. So now it's time to finish up this job and get it back into the cabinet. Now I do need to do some work on the cabinet, but before I do that, I just want to mention that the runners here on the bottom of the chassis were extremely loose because the grommets had perished. So I've replaced the grommets in these two brackets here, which is going to stabilize the brackets at the bottom. I'm going to try and fix the speaker grill where the holes were punched by someone in the long distance past. I think I have a better chance of making it look a little bit better rather than replace the whole fabric, which could be a horrific job. So let's see what happens. From the inside you can see the torn pieces where the threads are sticking up. So I'm going to snip off the loose threads, and with this adhesive, it's called Copydex, it's a fabric adhesive, it's a rubbery finish, and we'll see how this one works out. This is the side of the cabinet after trying to fix the holes in the speaker cloth. It's certainly not perfect, but it is a little bit better than it was before. So it'll just have to remain as a testament to previous vandalism. At the other end of the cabinet you can see the other speaker, and here you'll see a shadow of where the speaker is located in the middle. And this shadow is actually caused by dust and dirt migrating onto the cloth after many years of use. Because what's happening with the speaker is the cone is moving in and out constantly, in and out, and while it's pushing and pulling air in and out, it's also pushing and pulling dust over the ears, which contribute to this shadow. And you'll see it invariably on vintage radios where they've been used for a long, long time, particularly in a dusty and dirty environment. This one isn't too bad, but I'm going to try and clean it anyway. And I've heard that shaving foam, believe it or not, will do the job. So what I'm going to do is spray some shaving foam on the front here and let it soak in for about a half an hour and then clean it off. And we'll see if it makes any difference. And here is the shaving foam in place, just in case you thought I was kidding you. So Half an hour later, I'll come back, clean it off, let it dry, and see if it has made any difference at all. And this is the result of the shaving foam trick. It's not absolutely 100% perfect, but it's a big improvement on what it was before. On the side of the cabinet where there were holes punched through the speaker cloth, one of those holes went right through the speaker cone, as you can see here. And I've used the Copydex glue again to fill in this small hole. It's not very serious, so it won't make much difference. And the Copydex is of a rubbery nature, so it'll allow the cone to flex in and out as before. So no problem there. I've done a little bit more work before the chassis goes back into the cabinet. As you can see, I have the front dial replaced, which is looking nice and clean now. I've cleaned that up. However, there was one or two other little jobs. The dial bulb behind the glass here was dud, of course. So that's been replaced. And while I was doing some final checks, I happened to notice that the B+ voltage was actually quite low. If you look at the service diagram here, you can see in the power supply we have the rectifier valve putting out a voltage of 246 volts. Now that was down to about 218. So it turned out that the actual rectifier valve itself, which you can see here, it's an EZ80. It's sited at the very edge of the chassis here, and that was low emission, resulting in the low voltage. So I've replaced that. It's not a new valve, it's an old valve I happen to have from another chassis. So that brought the voltage bang up to 246, which is what it should be. So we're nearly ready to go. However, one final thing, as I normally do on a lot of these restorations, I fit a Bluetooth module, and this is it. I have it hanging out of the back of the set here. It's courtesy of a design by Manuel Caldera, but I've assembled the module here according to his plans, and I've added on an extra little module here. This is a little preamp, because invariably some of these Bluetooth modules don't put out enough of a signal to level it up with the rest of the radio in terms of the VHF or medium wave, and when you switch back and forwards there's a marked change in the level of volume which jumps up or down depending on which you're choosing. In this particular radio you select these two buttons here, which is the short wave and long wave, and you press them together to select the pickup input, which is what the signal from the Bluetooth module comes into the radio at. So we're nearly ready to go. I'll tidy up things a little bit, but in the next clip we'll see, hopefully, the chassis back in the cabinet. And this is the final result. It looks pretty smart having been cleaned up. Let's have a listen. First of all, medium wave. Now the only station we get here on medium wave is BBC Radio 5. And as you can hear, it's pretty noisy, but that's the best we can expect from medium wave these days. VHF is an awful lot better. Let's try that.
Would recommend anybody who hasn't seen it to go and search it out. So it's an amazing.
Shania Twain, King of Dreaming.
Or at school, as we want to know, 5. Just
If you missed Celebrity with Lucy Kennedy, you missed all of this. Okay. Our Ben first still together. That's Ben Affleck.
Introduces the special edition of Beta. All the best in advertising.
So lots of stations on VHF. Finally, let's hear what it sounds like through Bluetooth. And over here I have an iPad with some music on it. And this one happens to be Glenn Miller. So let's sign out with a bit of the American Patrol. So, if you have been, thanks for watching.